thanks a lot. I think, yeah, we are really proud of the young global changes, and we'll pursue that for by all means. So now I have the next honor to introduce our Sherpa panel, which will be chaired by my very good friend, I have to say that, Andreas Schaal from the OECD. Please, Andreas, come up.
Our next session will be G20 at 20, the future of the G20 in a changing world. Please welcome to the stage your moderator, Andreas Schaal.
Very warm welcome to everybody to this G20 Sherpa panel. It's a pleasure and an honor. And I remember having discussed this panel with Dennis Snow and Christian Castro last year, and the Global Solutions Summit was always in the heart of bringing inputs to the G20 from civil society, from governments, from industry, from social partners. So that's why I accepted this generous offer invitation to co-organize and moderate this panel. So very warm welcome to this one. I'm very often asked, what is a Sherpa? And a Sherpa is, I mean, you remember Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. So the guy who is carrying the heavy luggage for the boss to the summit, and that's where the Sherpa expression comes. So a Sherpa is doing the negotiations, is carrying the substance, is carrying the solutions, spending nights in dark conference rooms, and fighting for compromises in a multilateral context. And this is the role of a Sherpa, to bring his or her leader to the summit. Then there are Sherpas and Sous Sherpas. The Sous Sherpa carries the luggage for the Sherpa. And then there is the yak, which is this Himalaya animal with the long hairs. And I have to tell you, I was in my life everything. I was a yak, I was a Sous Sherpa, and now I'm a Sherpa. And that's why I'm glad to be joined by so many Sherpa colleagues who have been with me in this business for more than 2 decades. And let me warmly welcome first the panelists. I have from Argentina, Buenos Aires, my dear friend Federico Pinedo, the Sherpa of Argentina, Sherpa for President Milei. So please, we move over here. And next on my list is from India, the Sous Sherpa of India, live from Delhi, Abhishek Singh. So please come and join us on stage. Hi. And then, because to show you that I'm very proud that this is a panel of the Global South, but we also have somebody from the south of Europe, and we have the foreign policy advisor to the Spanish Prime Minister and the G20 Sous Sherpa, co-Sherpa, Emma Aparachi. Please, very warm welcome to Emma. And then not representing the north, but probably coming most north from Oslo, dear friend and colleague, the Sherpa of the Norwegian Prime Minister, Henrik Haubø. Henrik. And then Macky Sall, President Macky Sall mentioned that India invited the African Union to come have a seat in the G20 table. Please, colleagues, have already a seat. And we're very pleased and very happy to have the Sous Sherpa of the African Union, Ambassador Silva, with us. So please come on stage. And if anything, the United Nations is core to multilateralism. So I invite a good friend and long-term colleague, Navid Hanif, who is the Sous Sherpa for the United Nations and also the Assistant Secretary General. So I think we need to move the two of you, and please have a seat. So, well, welcome again, friends and colleagues, to be in a different setting, and I have to say in an almost nicer setting. As I said, I always recall the sessions in the G20 at 2 a.m. in the mornings when the compromising on climate cannot be reached, and you're sitting there and you wish you were not born because it's so tough, the negotiations. So we will have a more friendly dialogue here on an important topic, on the future of the G20. Because the G20 now with South Africa, with the South African presidency, concludes its first cycle. So after South Africa, all the countries around the table will have had the presidency for once, and that's why it's an important inflection point. And G20 leaders have agreed in Rio de Janeiro that this G20 at 20, how we call it, is an opportunity to kind of look at the things which went well and look at the things which we can do better. And I'm very pleased and honored that the South African presidency has asked the OECD, which I represent, to work on a review or on a study what has worked well. Very strong impetus of the G20 after the financial crisis, strong macroeconomic coordination, 2008, 2009, the creation of the Financial Stability Board, advances on the taxation agenda, very strong track record on macro coordination, maybe a bit less strong track record on structural policy reform, maybe a bit less track record on achievements on climate, maybe one of the challenging topics, and we had pledges against protectionism in the G20 right after the financial crisis, so this might be a bit more challenging going forward. But without further ado, I'm not continue to lecture you on our wisdom at the OECD anymore, but profit from the insights of this high-level panel. And I wanted to start with Federico Pinedo, because Argentina has chaired the G20 in 2018, made big inroads on issues as regards the digital economy, the future of work, also some development financing issues. So, Federico, what do you think, how can the G20 preserve its informality while being a leaders-driven process? And maybe the second half of the question, what do you think are the priorities for Argentina in this current context of reforming, redefining the G20 at crossroads?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's okay. Well, G20 is a place in order to cooperate between different countries, and there is a trade-off between, on the one hand, ambition, and on the other hand, common ground. No? If you are very much ambitious regarding lots of things, you're going to be less productive in having grip over the problems you need to solve. So now that we are reviewing the G20 for the next years, after all the countries have been presiding the G20 meetings, I think that we need to go back to basics, and we need to focus on the most urgent issues. No, the world is going through a very difficult moment. The UN Charter has been violated by the Ukraine invasion. Some very basic aspects of the UN Charter, as territorial integrity, have been violated. We are discussing the future of trade. We are discussing the future of a global currency. We are discussing if we need to have a new Bretton Woods agreement. So in that moment, with these pressures, I think that we need to focus on these aspects. The G20 has been created for reaching financial stability. And the G20 has two tracks in which it works. One is the finance track that is in charge of financial stability, and the other one is the Sherpa track, ours, which is or should be focused on several other issues not related with financial stability. So, in my view, it is important to focus on three main subjects. We have at present something like 20 permanent working groups and task forces on lots of things, but I think we need to focus in three main blocks or subjects. The first one related with human development, mainly related with cooperation regarding the experience of domestic policies in education, training, reskilling, upskilling for the future of work. That was the subject of Argentina's G20. Health, of course, to coordinate the common compromise with global health. The second, in my view, is economic development, and has a relationship with macroeconomic stability, with investments based on the rule of law, related with technology and the impact of technology. Trade, of course. And probably the third block, which is very important at present, is the energy transition. So if we focus on those problems which can drive us out of the problems of the moment, I think that the G20 will have a strong output.
Thanks so much, Federico. I think this was a strong lead us in, and you will not be surprised at some of the things you were saying. I'm hearing also from preliminary first contacts in Washington, D.C., where they are preparing for the 2026 US presidency of the G20. So back to basics, focus on economic growth, do not forget the people, focus on key challenges such as energy transition is something, again, can maybe help us or maybe define a way forward for the G20. But let me ask Henrik Harbour, you have been, Norway has been a guest country under several presidencies, including in Germany 2017, Brazil 2024, now South Africa 2025. From the perspective of a Nordic country, what do you think are the major areas where the G20 had a real impact, and how do you think, also in the spirit of Federico, we can take the issues further forward? Henrik.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. Honored to be here, and also, as you said, we are a guest country for the third time, which is extremely important for us. So the presidency each year has the possibility of inviting some guests, and we have been fortunate to be invited 3 times. My first point is that I think that before coming to the topics and where I think G20 really has delivered, the process is as important as the policy decisions, in my view, because the fact that this group of countries sit together, deal with the global big issues, it's a quite representative group that has improved a lot after the African Union joined, which was Macky Sall just mentioned in his speech before this session. That has been a very important addition to increase the representativity of the G20 as a group. When it comes to achievements, I think that, first of all, the financial crisis in 2008, I think G20 was very effective to dealing with that crisis. That was extremely important for the world economy and also for all other development issues. And coming out of that, I think it sounds maybe boring, but things like the Financial Stability Board, extremely important institutions coming out of the G20. Then recently, I think on global health, dealing with the pandemic, a very important issue. And then the last I would mention is on debt issue. That was also both debt issue and the importance of reform of global institutions, as Macky Sall talked about. The G20 has created a global framework for dealing with the debt distress. I think it's extremely important. The implementation must be speeded up, but we have a good global framework for that. And also a roadmap for reform of the multilateral development banks. I think Hanif will maybe come to that also, but I think the fact that the G20 countries together have elaborated this roadmap is a very good and practical way forward on this very important topic. So these are the issues I would like to mention.
No, but again, excellent input, Henrik. Thanks so much. And you sound like a Sherpa who was already there for 20 summits. And we're very glad to, at least for the OECD, to have you around the table with your wisdom on that. I mean, the process is as much important as the substance. I also believe that this is a point in the G20. I mean, we currently have in the Troika President Lula, President Ramaphosa, and President Trump. So the magnitude of policies represented in the Troika can probably not bigger. And there is a value to find common grounds, even if you come from different policy viewpoints around the country, around the group, not around the countries, with different countries. So, but with that in mind, and I think the G20 was always at the beginning, I think, criticized by some countries from the global south of following an advanced economies agenda. It was your financial crisis. That's why we are sitting around the table. Where are the agenda items coming from? What we now call the global south, or what are the agenda items focusing on development? But the G20 has always tried to encapsulate development in its prospects. And I think a major breakthrough was probably India's 2023 G20 presidency. It was part of a historic sequence of 4 consecutive G20 presidencies held by emerging economies, starting with Indonesia 2022, India 2023, Brazil 2024, and now South Africa 2025. So you also invited for the first time the African Union to have a permanent seat at the table, which everybody, I think, applauds as an important addition to the G20. But let me ask you, Abhishek Singh, how you see it from your perspective? Where do you think in this kind of development agenda, this 4th consecutive presidency had the biggest impact? And how do you think these development priorities, how do we deal in the current context with keeping these development priorities high on the agenda?
Thank you, Andreas, and it's such a pleasure to be in Berlin. In fact, I'm visiting Berlin after a long time. I was posted here as Deputy Ambassador in 2016-17, and it's always a pleasure, and I look forward to coming to Berlin. Talking about G20 at 20, I think it's a time to reflect. And the South African presidency has, in fact, as we speak, they're doing a survey of the same as to where we have progressed. And you rightly mentioned that the 4 consecutive presidencies of the Global South has set the tone. Probably we have made some forward movement, I would say, in terms of Global South versus Global North. It's about talking about G20 as a whole. So, countries like India, Indonesia, we have played, the role of a bridge builder. But 4 areas I feel, G20 at 20 should focus on. And that also emanates from the basic tenets of why G20 came into being. The first is, of course, the slowdown of the global growth. I mean, if you look at, 2000 to 2017, the overall global growth was around 3.7%. Last few years, it has been 3.3. Even big economies like Germany, where we are, is the first. I was being told by my colleague from the embassy that the first quarter is 0.2%, 0.2% in the first quarter of 2025. So we have to see how G20 can galvanize the overall global growth. The second, of course, is the lack of progress that has been there in the various sustainable development goals, 2030. Many of the goals we are lagging behind. Some are going in the negative direction. So how G20 can put its act together in helping countries, especially the ones from Global South, with the support of the Global North, to achieve those goals. Thirdly, we are also faced with new and emerging technologies. Everyone is talking about AI. How we are going to have the G20 discuss and move forward on emerging technologies like AI, how it can be made a means of global good. And fourthly, I would feel that, which is of course the topic that is of great importance for all of us, is the climate finance. So we are looking at G20 in the last 2 decades. It has done a phenomenal work in terms of providing solutions or getting consensus on global issues. But how it's going to get the G20 countries together on the important issue of climate finance, as we are looking at the COP30 in Berlin in Brazil. So these are the 4 issues that come to my mind, and I feel that of course South Africa is represented, but the 4 priorities of South African presidency of G20 is very well premised, and India has conveyed its full support to South Africa and its 4 priorities and the 3 task forces that they have made. But probably we'll have time to discuss that in the next few minutes. So I leave it at that. Thank you, Andreas.
No, but thanks so much, Abhishek. Again, I mean, 4 key priorities. I mean, economic growth in line with Federico, going back to basics, and I agree with you. This has been always in the core of the G20, in the foundation of the G20. Development, of course, important to bring these growth prospects also to developing country. And SDG and climate finance, I would combine, and I remember that we have done a report for India's G20 presidency on the SDG financing gap, where we showed clearly that we will never, I mean, looking at that we have, I think, $4.3 trillion gap in financing the SDGs. We will never make it if we don't bring additional resources such as private finance, blended finance, other stuff. So this can be also an agenda going forward to rethink about the development architecture, the development finance architecture. But with that, I wanted to ask Ambassador Sarah Silva, who is here with us representing the African Union, who is Director for Multilateral Affairs in the Foreign Ministry of Angola, who currently holds the presidency of the African Union. So everybody agrees it's very great to have the African Union around the table, to have not only South Africa as a voice around the table, but also the African Union representing more holistic the continent. And there's also an opportunity in South Africa, having South Africa as the first summit, first presidency on African soil, to advance African issues. And I just had a meeting with the team, discuss an initiative they're doing on AI for Africa and stuff like that. But I want to ask the African Union, how do you see up to now the role you have in the G20, and what are African Union's priorities for this second cycle, for the upcoming second cycle of the presidency? And is there anything else one needs to do to strengthen Africa's voice around the table? Please, Sarah.
Thank you, Andreas. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to say that since its admission, the African Union has been working on ensuring that the Africa voice is heard and amplified in G20 and in the global arena. This is in line with the vision of the African Union Agenda 2063, aimed to ensure that Africa becomes a strong and influential global player, able to foster and in position and able to finance its development. Regarding these priorities, the EU Agenda 2063 guides Africa's participation in the G20, as well as its priorities, which were agreed by the AU Executive Council, namely achieve the Agenda 2063 and its second decade of action and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, reform the international financial architecture, international food security and agriculture, fair energy transition, trade and investment, health and vaccine manufacturing. And it should be noted that upon admitting the African Union into G20 as a permanent member, the G20 committed to support the African Union in realizing the aspiration of the Agenda 2063. That's why I named these priorities. Yeah.
Thanks so much. No, indeed. I mean, I think one of the things, and you mentioned the African Union Agenda 2063, and this is also something which has helped us to guide in the past G20 exercises to have an ambition, to have goals for the G20. I remember the Australian presidency in 2014 had the goal of promoting 2% more growth in 5 years by ambitious structural reform. So I think this having goals in the G20 agenda is also probably something we need to do going forward. With that, I want to ask Emma Abarachi, good friend and foreign policy advisor of the president of the Council of Spain, and want to ask you, because Spain is also hosting the fourth Financing for Development conference in Sevilla in end of June, early July. And because also Abhishek mentioned the topic of financing for development, SDG financing, climate financing, how do you see the potential, how do you see the interlinks between the process and the priorities Spain is advancing in the FFD4 context, and what can the G20 do more or better to support you in this Herculean endeavor?
Well, thank you very much, Andreas, and thank you for inviting me to this session. Congratulations to the organizers for this impressive setup of global solutions, 20th G20. So we are, Spain is a permanent guest to the G20 and has participated over the years since the inception of the G20 in 2008, and we've been working with partners and colleagues in trying to provide our view and in a way that we can bridge differences among different parts of the G20. We are now in Spain fully focused together with the UN, of course, my dear friend Navid and all the team in the UN headquarters in the organization of Seville. And we firmly believe that there is an interconnection between what the G20 has been doing over the past few years and what we are going to see in Seville in once in a decade summit that is going to take place for financing for development. It's the fourth conference on financing for development. And how does the G20 work or has been working over the years? Well, we see that the main focus of Seville should be to provide new solutions, new instruments with the adequate flexibility in order to fulfill the 2030 agenda. And in this regard, we've seen that many of the discussions that we have had in previous presidencies, I remember very well in India when we were discussing the initiative of the better, bigger, and more effective NDBs, for instance, and the review of the capital adequacy framework in 2022. These are elements and discussions that are taking place within the G20 that are really feeding into the UN processes. And if I had to, for instance, during the pandemic, the Saudi Arabian presidency and the references and instruments that we designed for debt suspension service, or what we can do also in debt suspension within the Sevilla conference. These are very interlinked type of discussions that are taking place. But if I had to define the G20 and as a permanent guest, which is an honor for Spain, I have to say, if I had to define the G20, I would say that it's the preeminent global agenda shaper, in the sense that we in the G20 are able to forge basic consensus among global economies that later on crystallize in a global consensus at the multilateral level in the United Nations. This is why it's so important that we have these discussions in the various tracks, as our colleague from Argentina was saying before. We have these discussions which are very lengthy and very difficult. I remember very well in Rome, we were not sleeping for 3 days in a row, just before the summit. But at that time, G20 was taking place back to back with COP in Glasgow. And I remember very well those lengthy discussions in Rome with regards to climate action. And the consensus that it was reached in Rome fed into the COP and allowed the COP in Glasgow to be successful as well. So this crystallization of global consensus within the G20 and going into the multilateral system is something that we need to protect and work in the coming years. And we really hope that in Seville we are able to do the same, and all the work that has been done so far in terms of financing for development is crystallized in an ambitious outcome document. We want to call it the Sevilla Commitment, so that we can really bring a future of hope in terms of financing for development, which is really at the core of the multilateral system. And we, in this moment in which we are under an important challenge in terms of multilateralism, we really, really need to, as the international community, to provide a message that multilateralism works for the people, is able to deliver. And Sevilla is an opportunity for leaders to say so. And we really hope that together with the help of the United Nations and the rest of colleagues, we arrive to that ambitious outcome. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Emma, because I think it's really important what you said. I mean, multilateralism that delivers for people. And that's why we developed, for example, in the OECD, the leitmotif, better policies for better lives, because we do not only want to work on policy, on analytical evidence, but we also want to make sure that what we are doing in the multilateral context is really delivering for the people. And the financing for development can be an important point, and I'm very glad that you both, Henrik and Emma, you mentioned the debt service suspension initiative, which was negotiated in the G20. I think that topic is probably one of the big ticket items also between advanced emerging economies. How to solve this going forward in a rising debt burden might be also bringing back home to core issues. The debt issue is a core economic issue. So whatever we can do on the financing for development to help and support, we will. And that's a brilliant bridge. Thanks so much. You make my job as a moderator really easy, to the United Nations. And you should know that I'm always sitting left of Navid in the G20, so I'm always on the left corner, so the OECD in the left corner of the UN. I'm sure this means something also politically. And very pleased to share the seat next to you, Navid. And for you, I mean, financing for development is a big ticket item. The COP in Belém, in Brazil, Latin America, will be another big ticket item. So the world full of challenges. What is the solution from a UN point, and what can international organizations such as us, the United Nations and the OECD, help to support this process? Navid.
Thank you, Andreas, for the opportunity to join this distinguished panel roundtable. And thanks to the host for the Solutions Summit. I have had very candid exchanges since yesterday, and I find this platform very illuminating on many issues. And it's always so reassuring to have you next to me, and we're at the G20. I think G20 was a premier forum. It still remains a premier forum for international cooperation. 2 presidencies, many have done it, but South Africa, with the headline of Ubuntu, defines G20. I am because we are. And India's presidency, one earth, one family, one future. That's what G20 captures. 80% of the world economy, more than 60% of the world's population. And commendable job in managing crises. You just mentioned COVID-19. They came up with so many initiatives and solutions which stabilized the global economy and sent a clear message of confidence and trust. And G20 still remains indispensable to global actions on key issues. So I want to flag 3 things, and you have also said G20 at 20. What should we be suggesting to South Africa and the incoming host? Chair. Stabilization of financial system and financial regulation design, commendable job. But focus on development finance has been rather limited. I will flag 3 issues. One was sent by our young ambassador from Cameroon. Development finance is not charity. It's about changing the rules of the game, where financial decisions are aligned with the goals of climate action and sustainable development goals. So South Africa's initiative, reducing the cost of capital, will be a major step forward in enabling countries to access affordable long-term finance, not charity, but affordable long-term finance for sustainable development outcomes and climate results. First step is the multilateral development banks. Their capital base has to go up. It's on the table, bolder, bigger banks. Second, they should align their lending policies with the climate goals and sustainable development goals. Third is mobilization of private capital. They have to develop instruments, they exist also, deploy those more frequently to mobilize private capital. Second layer of actions, and I'm not saying the G20 in any way should be lax on macroprudential rules, but there is a way to simplify those rules so that private capital can go to destinations where it is reluctant to go right now. So rules and regulations should be strictly implemented, but at the same time create space for private capital to move. It's not moving to the destination where it is badly needed. And we expect Seville, and it's our honor to support Spain, Seville to break new ground in that area. Third is the issue of debt. 68 countries are in some degree of debt distress, from high distress to mid to low level distress. But if we do not address it with speed and scale, the risks are mounting. Common framework has done significant work, delivered results, but speed and scale are missing. We have said that at every G20 meeting, the criteria or criterion for offering support should not be based only on income. If a country is in debt distress or in the verge of distress, income should not be the only criterion. Vulnerability is also a factor, then that is offered. So I just wanted to flag things which are coming our way for Seville, and G20's support and bold actions will be critical for Seville outcome to be impactful and long-lasting. I also want to flag 2 things for the Sherpa track Ambassador Pinedo mentioned. Commendable that G20 has focused on the 2030 action plan. Every presidency has delivered that. We recommend in the coming years, 2030 agenda should remain the central focus of Sherpa track because it captures the essence of our development trajectory for developed and developing countries. So it's critical. At the same time, there is a need for some streamlining. So G20 can also think where it brings the unique value addition. And yesterday, in the South Africa T20 leader mentioned, think of SMART, specific, measurable, and that's where we need time-bound, relevant. That's the kind of interventions needed from the G20 on the Sherpa track. Lastly, on financing for development, we do expect breakthroughs in CVA on areas where countries are very keen to see results. And that should be a massive investment push from CVA, public and private, by the policy interventions I've just highlighted. And G20 can really give a new push to those areas of action before we go to CVA to accelerate massive investments that should go for the SDGs, especially to Africa. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Navid. Development finance is not charity. I could not agree more. It's also about empowering the countries to manage their destiny and to deliver for the people, and something we'll continue to have a conversation. I'm now very conscious, because of being a German and wearing a Japanese watch, I'm very conscious of time. I just asked the organizers, it cannot be serious that we have only 1 minute, 10 seconds left. I was told, because we started late, we can have at least a bit more, so maybe you can change the watch to another 10 minutes or so. Would be really appreciated. And if not, just the audience can just put like this, and then we stop right away, okay? So this or this. So I think 10 minutes would be fair for this extraordinary panel. And in this 10 minutes, okay? No, not at all?
I'm sorry, but...
I have two?
Yes.
But you told me before that I have at least as much as I lost at the beginning.
I told you we would add it all to this clock, and we did. I'm sorry, you just have a lot to talk about.
So then 3 quick points from each of you. G20 vision statement for the next 20 years. What are the 3 bullets? Each of you has 30 seconds. Federico.
Let's have outputs. Less words, more facts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Abhishek.
Reforms of the MDB and multilateral development banks, digital public infrastructure, and closing the gap between the global north and the global south. India and other countries can play the role of a bridge builder. Thank you.
Emma.
For me, it would be financing for development, for sustainable development, fight against climate change, and a major challenge that we're facing nowadays is the governance of artificial intelligence and how the G20 fits into larger fora such as the UN processes with a human-centric and development-friendly approach.
Henrik.
Yes, so first point is effective reduction of poverty and inequality in the world. Second is effective collective climate action. And the third point is financing and effective institutions to do exactly that.
Navid.
First point, connect with the larger UN membership. So commendation to Brazil. There was a meeting of the foreign ministers. This year, there will be first ever biennial summit of the G20, UN, and IFIs. So we really invite all G20 members to engage with that. Second, keep the 2030 agenda at the center of your decision making. Make sure people, planet, and prosperity are delivered for everyone. And lastly, G20 remains and holds the key to opening affordable finance for everyone on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
For me, the G20 needs to be led by lead. That's listening, delivering, and inclusion and delivering.
Thanks so much. Listen, I mean, this discussion, if anything, has proven the importance of the G20 on the solution side. And if Dennis Snauer and Christian Kastrup allow us, we will be back to speak with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I wanted to just conclude, and sorry again for using another minute, but I want to conclude with a little anecdote from my holidays in the Provence, when my wife wanted to buy a big lavender bush. And I was kind of telling her, no, we're just starting our holidays, and I was arguing with the merchant, it's too big for the car. And then the merchant said to me, mais monsieur, il n'y a pas de problème, il n'y a que des solutions. And this is a motto for the Global Solutions Summit. There are challenges outside, there are geopolitical challenges outside, but, mes messieurs, there's a lot of problems, but there's also a lot of solutions, and that's why it's such a good venue, the Global Solutions Summit, and thanks so much for having us here.